Still don't know your leather from your microfiber? Maybe you don't know if you're a center toe box or a classic toe box. Well, in today's episode, we're going to find out. Hello again everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. So today in episode 2 of our climbing shoe sizing guide series, we're going to be talking mainly about the volume of a shoe, the shape of a shoe, and leather versus synthetic. Let's get right into it. So to get us started today, we'll talk about volume. So volume can be a bit of a tricky topic. The way I define volume is the overall space that's within the shoe, so the space that your foot is going to fill up. So there are high volume shoes, standard volume shoes, and low volume shoes. What do I mean by this? A high volume shoe is often not going to be classified as such unless the brand is trying to shout about it particularly. So for example, I've got a TN Pro here, which is actually quite a narrow shoe in terms of its toe box and overall profile. However, I tend to find, certainly over the tops of the toes, it is quite a high volume shoe. So this is a little bit of an anomaly because a lot of high volume shoes tend to be broader, but this appeals to someone who might have a narrower foot but is actually a little bit stockier over the top of the foot itself. And that's mainly who high volume shoes are going to appeal to, people who are generally going to have a stockier or higher volume foot. Another really good example is the Red Chili Circuit, which is incredibly voluminous. It's a very, very spacious shoe, and that's because it is both broad at the forefoot and at the heel, and is also very high volume. So if you feel like you've got very large, wide and high volume feet, then yes, you're going to be wanting to look at something that is probably more high volume and wide fit, just like the Red Chili Circuit. In terms of standard volume, that's a bit of a non-classification. It's a shoe that is going to fit probably a broad range of people, that is going to be volume-wise kind of in the middle. It's not super high volume, it's not going to appeal to those with a really stocky high volume foot, but it's also not going to be ideal for those who have quite a slim foot that would maybe find themselves in that low volume category. So standard volume is a nondescript volume for that shoe. It's not aiming to be either high or low volume. When it comes to low volume shoes, not all brands are the same. It can get a little confusing. Some brands choose to go down the description of women's shoes, others low volume, and that is actually down to the decisions they maybe make around their women's or low volume shoes. Scarpa and Sportiva are really good examples of this. So Scarpa, for example, they actually make differences to the volume of the shoe, the space within the shoe. The prime example I'm going to use is the Vapor V LV, which is a recent re-release for them. And the main changes they'll make are at the back of the shoe. When they're going to alter the volume of the heel cup itself, it is going to be a little bit narrower and therefore less voluminous. So if you find the standard Vapor a little bit too voluminous at the heel, the LV might be a good option. The volume changes then start to gradually influence the front of the shoe, and you might find over the top of the foot feels a little bit snugger as well if you're a lower volume foot. The other parts of this shoe that have been changed to benefit the wearer if they're a bit lighter is going to be the rubber compound. So as we can see in the standard Vapor V, it uses excess edge rubber, which is going to be more beneficial if you're a little bit heavier or you prefer that stiffer compound to help you with edging or giving you a little bit more support underfoot. Whereas if you're a lighter climber, you'll still get a pretty good amount of support from the shoe, especially in the Vapor V's case because it is a little bit stiffer as a shoe anyway, but the compound is going to be a bit grippier and a little bit more sensitive and also a little bit more malleable versus edge. So you have a little bit more confidence underfoot when smearing, which can be great on high friction rock types or large volumes indoors. Now that's not to say if you're a heavier climber that you can't use softer compounds like Excess Grip 2, it's just that you might find that you run through them very quickly. Moving on to how La Sportiva, as another brand example, classifies their women's line, they actually don't touch the volume of their shoes at all, which might be an intriguing insight for you all. Their men's and women's shoes, volume-wise, are completely the same. However, they do change the tensioning and often change the compound of rubber that is underfoot, again to help complement a lighter climber. This again generally means that the women's shoes are going to be a little bit more malleable and the compound of rubber is going to be a bit grippier and a bit softer. And like Scarpa, it also means that the size runs are generally going to start a lot smaller. So for those with smaller or more petite feet that are having to downsize even further from their already small shoe size, the entry point is a lot lower in those low volume or women's shoes. So those are two big examples of how two different brands define their women's or low volume shoes. It does differentiate a little bit across different brands, so be aware of that. But we have all of that information being collated into our brand new climbing shoe sizing guide, which we're hoping to release around early to mid-November. One quite important thing to consider is the shape of a climbing shoe. So unfortunately, no climbing shoe is going to look like your foot. And if it does, then I'm a little bit concerned for your well-being. But different manufacturers are going to have different lasts. So lasts being the model foot that they use to design their climbing shoe around. That's why you might find one brand fits a lot better than another. It's simply because the shape of the shoe is going to suit your foot a little bit more. So what are the different shapes of shoes? So we've talked a little bit about volume, and that is one way that you can alter the fit and the feel of the shoe. But the shape of a shoe is generally informed firstly by its toe box. So there are three classifications at the moment for what different toe boxes are out there. So you have a classic toe box. This is generally going to be quite asymmetric. Now what do I mean by that? It's the banana shape that you'll see in this shoe here. It's mainly going to be pulling the power over onto that big toe. So it's often for people who have the big toe as the tallest toe on their foot, and then the rest of their toes simply fall away. The next one is going to be a center toe box. This is generally on paper best for people who have a taller second or index toe, however you'd like to term it, and that is going to pull the power into the center line and focus the power right on the end of that second most toe. And then we have the square toe box, which is quite rare. There's not many shoes that feature it. You can find it on this model here, and in theory it's best for those who have a big toe and a second toe that are the same height. So they're going to sit together nice and neatly, and there's not much variance between the big or second toe. As I described, the toe box shape is designed to draw the power into certain areas of your foot, but as you can imagine, this will also inform how comfortable the front end of that shoe is, and because we're going to be spending most of our time on our toes, yeah, that wants to be as close to your foot shape as possible, so getting that right is really important. It's only worth trying on lots of different models if you're unsure, but hopefully the diagrams that I've shown here will give you an idea of what your foot shape might come under. Another thing to consider is the upper material. So in the Tarantula, it is a leather, and what that means is that it's a bit more breathable versus a microfiber upper. It's also going to stretch more. Talking about synthetic, let's move on to the other most commonly found upper material, which is going to be microfiber. So we have a Tenea Mastia here, which is again a really lovely technical shoe. And what are the pros and cons of microfiber? So microfiber is going to stretch less. I tend to say it's going to stretch about a third of a size versus a half, which can seem pretty negligible, but it does help. This means that it's a really good candidate for a resole. So if you're looking to get your shoes resoled rather than buying a whole new pair, microfiber uppers can hold their shape a little bit better, so that might be of benefit to you. The cons of microfibre, unfortunately, are that they don't breathe quite as well as leather. So you'll often find, yeah, multi-pitch, long day trad shoes are made of leather, so they can help the foot breathe throughout a long day. So I might recommend, if you're perspirationally gifted, to clean your synthetic shoes more regularly. I would highly recommend cleaning your shoes full stop, but again, if you find that you prefer synthetic shoes, they fit you really well, I just clean them a bit more regularly if, again, you find you sweat through your feet a little bit more. So there we have it. That is episode 2. We've talked about volume, we've talked about shoe shape, and we've also talked about the pros and cons of synthetic and leather-based shoes. As always, folks, thank you so much for watching, and if you have enjoyed, please feel free to hit that like and subscribe button for more RockRunTV content. Congratulations, you've reached the end of another video. Well done, you. If you've not had your fill of climbing shoe content, well, don't you worry, we've got another video lined up right after this one.